Did you ever cook an egg on a sidewalk?
Oh, all the time. I was such a show off. If any kids came to visit, I'd take them out and crack the egg on the sidewalk and watch them just go, "Oh, good grief." Yeah, it's very impressive because when you crack an egg on the sidewalk in Arizona, it cooks in about 10 seconds.
That's horrible. Lunch
Yeah,
is
it
served.
is horrible. Another thing you don't do in Arizona is wear high heels on a hot day because your heel will sink right into the asphalt on the street.
Really?
Oh,
Oh.
yeah.
So between the spiders, the scorpions, and the heels sinking in the asphalt, I don't know. Arizona is not my place.
Well, I used to complain about the heat, and my dad used to say, Carol, I hope someday you marry somebody from Canada. Then you can freeze to death the rest of your life.
Ah, you did.
Yeah, here I am.
Let's talk about elementary school. Do you remember your elementary school and what are some of your fondest memories?
I loved elementary school. In fact, I always loved going to school. I just loved learning and I loved the teacher. I always loved the teacher and I loved the kids in my class. Yeah. One of my greatest memory of elementary school happened in grade 6. I was sitting in class one day and the principal said, "Will Kiko Dodge please come to the office?" And of course, you know how everybody turns and looks at you like, "Oh, what did you do? What did you do?" And I thought, "Oh, what did I do?" So I went down to the office and the principal sat across the table and he said, "We have a new student in our school. She's come from Idaho. She's got lots of health problems. She's got terrible asthma. And the doctor has told her parents that she has to come to Arizona to go to school because Idaho is too cold. So she's going to come here every year to go to school. And she needs a friend. And I was wondering if you would be her friend." And I said, "Oh, sure." And he said, "Well, I have to tell you, she doesn't have very much hair. So kids are going to make fun of her. And she has a glass eye, and it's very evident that it's not a normal eye. So she doesn't look like all the other kids. Is that okay for you?" And I said, "Oh, sure." So he took me in another room to meet her. And she was just a tiny, skinny little girl. And I thought, well, we can be good friends. We started hanging out a little bit together. And little did I realize she would become one of the great friends of my life. In fact, we went all through school together and we roomed together at university. She was there the day I was married. She lives in Washington now. And so sometimes I get to see her when we go to visit Michael and Danny and everybody. Uh, when Dad and I served a mission to Vietnam, she and her husband served a mission to to Spain. So our lives have really lined up. I also went and spent part of a summer at her on her farm in Idaho when I was in the summer after grade 6. We've just we've just been wonderful friends. And I've thought a lot about this. You must never ever judge a book by its cover, by what you see, or by a first impression. You must give it time. You must give everything time and people time. There's always something absolutely wonderful about every person that you meet.
When you were little, what was considered a big treat when going out for dinner?
Oh, My dad not only owned a motel, he was a realtor. And he was a really good realtor. He sold lots of houses because he was so personable and so sharp. And for a long time, he was president of the Arizona Real Estate Board. So he was a great realtor. And he was also very superstitious. He was really superstitious. For instance, when he was going to make a sale and was pretty sure it was really good, he would never talk about it. He would never, ever talk about it. He'd say, when the sale is final, you'll know because I'll walk into the room and shake your hand. So that's what he would do. He wouldn't say a word. He'd just walk into a room, whatever you were doing, and he'd shake your hand and you knew, you sold a house or you sold something. And then we would all go out to this wonderful restaurant in Scottsdale called the Safari. And that's where I fell in love with eating prime ribs. Prime rib. Oh my God. I can still just taste the prime rib at the Safari. That was, to me, the ultimate. Oh, well, another ultimate was going to Mata's and having Mexican food. I loved it when my parents would go out on a date because they'd feel guilty about leaving me with the motel. And so they'd get me a dinner from Mata's and bring it home.
We're well compensated.
Oh yeah, I loved it. So those were treats for me and still would be if I lived there, right?
Yeah.
Yeah.
Where did your family like to vacation?
Every year my dad would say, where shall we go? Where shall we go? And we would all yell, California. We'd always go over to the beach and we would rent a little house right on the beach. Oh, it was what vacations. What vacations. And my dad was very spontaneous. So things weren't planned a long time in advance. He would just get up and say, let's do this. Let's do this weekend. It was so exciting. And Nana was not spontaneous. She would sit at that table and say, now, just a minute, Carl, just a minute. And I think now as I look at myself and my husband, Bill, I realize I'm my dad and Bill is my mom saying, just a minute, just a minute, Carol. But I just love surprises and spontaneity and he was the master of them. So we would go over and have fun in California.
What was your most memorable vacation experience as a kid?
Well, I've got two that I have to tell you. One was that one day we were playing on the beach in California and my dad said, look out there. Do you see something bobbing in the water? And I thought, well, it's a bird, but no, it wasn't a bird. And it kept coming in and in and in. And as we played on the beach all afternoon, it got close enough that my dad jumped in and went out and got it and hauled it in. And here it was a box, a wooden box full of rations from a ship that had gone down in World War II. And we took it back to our hotel and we pried it all open. It was full of green cans, stamped with the dates of the war on it. I thought, this has been bobbing around in this ocean all these years. And my dad said, so let's open all these cans and whatever is in them, we'll eat it for supper. So we opened all the cans, but none of us could stand to eat any of it. But it was so exciting to find that and to think, what ship? Who would have eaten this? It was just magical. Another thing that I really remember, oh, this is hard to say because it's so emotional for me. And I think of it all the time. When I would get up super early on these holidays and I would go and just sit by the ocean by myself. And one morning, really early, I was doing that and I felt a hand on my shoulder and I turned around and it was my dad. And he said, "Wow, you're really up early." I said, "Yeah, I love to watch that ocean." He said, "I know those waves, they just keep coming and coming and coming." I said, "Yeah, I think they do that all the time." And he says, "Yeah, they never stop, Carol. All the time we're in Arizona and we're so hot and we're so tired and life is going on, those waves are rolling in." And he said, "I want you to remember that my love for you is just like those waves. And it will always be, no matter where you are or what you're doing. My love will always, always be there." And I still think of that so often, Christine, when we come to Victoria to visit you and I sit on those beaches, I think of it. I think of it always. Yeah.
That's beautiful. Well, back to the motel. With a motel full of snowbirds, what image did you form of Canada when you were a kid?
Well, in all those people that came to our motel every winter, we had a group of 4 doctors, and we called them the Canadians. They were from Ontario. I don't know what their poor wives did all winter, but these 4 guys came together. They were all married, and they all came down to Arizona and stayed at our motel. And they would always bring my mom a beautiful little porcelain figurine. Oh, and they were such nice people. So I just thought Canadians must be the most gracious, wonderful people in the world.
They just
That's
can't
what
stand their wives.
I didn't think about the weather at all in Canada. I just thought, no, people in Canada are really wonderful. Which kind of makes another point. You know, you may be the only member of the church anyone ever knows, or you may be the only single person anybody ever has anything to do with. You have to be sure that the impression that you leave with them is that you are loving and open and kind always, because you never know what they'll remember about you. And that's what I remember about those 4 men. They were just lovable, all of them.
What was the first thing you learned to cook?
The first thing I ever wanted to learn to cook was cinnamon buns. And I don't know that I learned to cook them. I learned to cook them mostly from my mother-in-law, Audrey Laycock. But I watched my grandmother make cinnamon buns hundreds of times. And that's what I wanted to learn to cook. So she would let me punch down the dough. She would let me sprinkle on the sugar. So I had it down pretty good before I grew up. And Nana told me that when Grandma Beck died, they went to dress her in the funeral home. And she was lying there and she had little biceps. She had little muscles right there. And the man in the funeral home said, "Did she lift weights? Did she lift weights?" And Nana said, "No, she needed cinnamon buns. And she had those little muscles to prove it."
Oh,
She
I
was
love that.
famous for those. Yeah.